and my mother's participation in the movement. And it is dear to my heart because it ties in with my Christian experience. God makes himself known to you in different ways. And as a child, in 1963, my sisters and I were watching the 5 o'clock news. And we saw our mother be knocked down by a fire hose in Kelly Ingram Park. She worked in an office just across the street. And on her lunch break, she went to be with the marchers, and that was the day that they turned the fire hoses and the dogs are loose. And we saw our mother on the 5 o'clock news. We didn't know that it was a rebroadcast of something that had happened earlier that day. So the three of us cradled together in the living room, and we started praying that the Lord would bring our mother home safely. And while we were praying, Mama came in the door. We didn't know that it was a broadcast of something that had happened earlier that day. We thought we were just children. We thought it was happening right then. And we were praying that God would send Mama home. And from that day to this one, nobody can tell me that there's not a God. That was the way I knew as a child that God was real, because I asked God to send my mama home safe. When Mama came in the door, I knew then that there was a God that answers prayer. Amen. I am humbled as well as honored to stand here today to speak on such a momentous occasion as this. We celebrate today the 82nd anniversary of the birth of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the first and only African American to be honored with a national holiday. It is with pride that a son of the racist South come to the West to speak on the contributions of this great America. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a preacher, pastor, prophet, and drum major for justice. His voice gave voice to a voiceless people whose lives were relegated to second-class citizenship, menial labor, and practical invisibility. Dr. King called America and the whole world's attention to the plight, the subhuman plight of the American Negro. He gave us hope for a better day. A day when all of God's children would walk together as brothers and sisters. He was the instrument that God used to prick the consciousness of this nation to liberate a disenfranchised people. I can never forget the emptiness that I saw in my mother's face when the news was released that Dr. King had been gunned down on the balcony of the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. I can still remember going to school the next day, passing by several all-white modern schools to get to an overcrowded black school, and being told by my 8th grade science teacher, who, by the way, held a doctorate degree in education, but because of the color of his skin, he had to teach 8th grade science in a segregated school. Yes, Dr. Evans told us that day, y'all better get your acts together, because our greatest hope is now gone. The vision of this great man transcended his mortal frame. He told us of a dream. And what was hard for us to realize in 1968 was that dreams are larger than dreamers. So here we are, 43 years later, able to look back, to look at, and to look to. After taking this trifold look, I want to speak to you today from the subject, where we were, where we are, and where are we going. Where we were. I was born in Bessemer, Alabama, March 26, 1956, in a segregated maternity ward in Bessemer General Hospital. Bessemer is just 9 miles from Birmingham. The cities are in the same county. The two cities, or of the two cities, it was a bit rougher growing up in Bessemer than it was in Birmingham because blacks in Bessemer were a greater minority than in Birmingham. I grew up in a dual world. The black world that I functioned in and the white world that I could only watch. My grandmother was a domestic that worked in the house of an affluent white family. I saw the clear, clean, white water fountains, but had to drink from the dirty, rusty black ones. I went to the back door of the stadium grill and had to be handed a sandwich out of a window while the whites could go in the front door, sit down, and enjoy a meal. And when it comes to the school system, we studied from books that were 6 to 7 editions older and sometimes even out of print than the white schools. Yes, that's where we were. Grown black men having to say yes, sir, to young white boys, and yes, ma'am, to young white girls. Grown black women being called Amy and Gal. And yes, the segregation even filtered over into the church. The White First Baptist Church of Bessemer broadcast their Sunday night service over a local radio station, and the local white pastor was preaching, and he was bragging on the radio broadcast that night about how his maid Beulah could sing. And how when Beulah had to sing, he would even take off from his duties as pastor and go over to the colored church to hear Beulah sing. But I want you to feel where his mind was. He said on the radio, and we were listening, he said, when I get to heaven, I'm going to go over into the colored section. So I can hear Beulah sing. Yeah, that was the mindset of the world that I grew up in. We were segregated in public accommodations. Everything was separate, but nothing was equal. It was this kind of society that forced black churches to organize black colleges, black businessmen to start insurance companies, banks, funeral homes, and radio stations. Black colleges received and educated black minds when white colleges wouldn't take us. You may have heard of Tuskegee and Talladega, but my alma mater, Alabama A&M University, was founded by a black Methodist preacher, Dr.